So you may have heard that Joe Rogan's podcast sold for $100 million or more in a deal for exclusive rights with Spotify. So basically, this deal happened because Joe Rogan can literally single-handedly make you the top podcast platform, which of course is Spotify's goal. He gets ridiculous amount of views. He attracts a very wide range of people, and that's one of the reasons he's earning this much money. So I'm going to break down his podcast and why it got this big in a way that kind of looks at it from a marketer's perspective and an online, business person's perspective. So you can maybe use this for your own business or for your own benefit in the future if you want to build your own brand. So basically, one of the reasons the Joe Rogan experience is so popular is because it keeps your attention for a very long time. They have very long episodes that are usually around 3 hours each. So if you look at any one of the videos or podcast episodes on whatever platform you're looking at this on, you have very long form content. So if you look at pretty much any YouTube expert like video creators, and Tim Schmoyer, if you look at, say, Daryl Eves, who literally helps build YouTube brands for a living. If you look at even Little Monster Media, which is another company that does the same thing, they build YouTube brands for a living. And these three will usually recommend that you make longer videos, especially in that 10-minute or so range, as long as a video can be without the watch time dropping off and without the engagement dropping off. So what's great about a podcast is a lot of people will listen to it long form, especially if the host is entertaining and the guest is interesting or famous. People like Joe Rogan because he's a comedian, because he's funny, because he talks like just one of your friends, and he's easy to understand. He's also very well read. He knows a lot about a lot of things. So because lots of people love Joe Rogan, they will give his podcast a chance no matter who the guest is. Another thing you'll notice is he has a lot of different guests. So let's just look on here. He's had, Tony Hawk, a pro skateboarder. He's had people who are, political writers, or he's had a doctor like Rhonda Patrick who studies all sorts of things related to health. You have certain scientists. You have Elon Musk, who's built multiple companies as an entrepreneur. So you have a lot of different types of guests. You have a comedian like Duncan Trussell. You have all sorts of different people. So he has a very wide-ranging audience. This gives him limitless potential because he's not stuck with a small niche. Another thing you'll notice is the volume that he produces content. He usually doesn't even seem to care that much about what time of day he publishes content or things like that. He'll do multiple interviews in the same day sometimes. He'll even have somebody like Elon Musk on and then interview somebody right after that, which would wear out most podcast hosts, but he will do this for hours, maybe 5 days a week, and then publish hours and hours and hours of content to YouTube that is great for YouTube's algorithm and keeps people on the platform because they are long form and because they keep people's attention. The longer you keep people on YouTube's platform with your videos, pretty much the better you're going to do and the more YouTube will want to promote you. This goes well for podcast episodes as well. But for YouTube especially, which helped to grow his podcast even more, it's very good for the algorithm. And when you benefit YouTube, they will benefit you by promoting your videos more. And he's able to do this kind of volume because the show is not as hard to produce as something like, say, Dude Perfect or something like that, where they have to do a bunch of stunts, they have a bunch of people. It's just him and one other person. Usually they are just recording themselves talking. Obviously, the parts of the show that are making these videos and making these episodes are very high quality as far as audio, as far as visuals and things like that. But it's not fundamentally that hard to, record something like that as opposed to something that has a lot more editing or a lot of, say, stock footage or crazy visuals or, things like say Dude Perfect as an example of something that's really hard to produce. So from a host perspective, a lot of people will watch every single episode or at least give it a chance, even if it's a guest they've never heard of, because they like Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan is funny. So he's literally a professional comedian, and he was before he even did the podcast. If you go to joerogan.com, you can look up his comedy specials and see different shows of him live, and he's very funny. He's also got that celebrity factor, and he actually knows how to host a show because he's literally done it on Fear Factor, which is another very popular TV show from the past that a lot of people really love to watch. And if you look at pretty much any late night show like Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel or something like that, you'll notice that usually it's hosted by a comedian. They have a lot of different types of guests, and they will talk about all sorts of stuff. But the thing is, Joe Rogan gives them more time, and so he can produce more content per day than, say, Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon can, even though it's the same type of thing, and they usually have to interview certain types of guests, more like celebrities and stuff, whereas Joe Rogan can go out and interview some random scientist, some conspiracy theorist, a political commentator, or things like that, which kind of gives him a little bit wider audience maybe than, the regular talk show host that might have a little bit of competition on, say YouTube or podcast platforms. Another great thing from a marketing perspective, which is maybe or maybe not even done on purpose, is he's cross-promoting basically between a podcast and a YouTube channel. This is something that even other YouTubers like Tim Ferriss have started to do, but Joe Rogan really does it in the best possible way. So you can find the Joe Rogan Experience on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, things like that right now. Obviously, it's going to go to Spotify in the future once the deal kicks in. But then he has all this stuff on YouTube. So you have as many platforms as possible showing the content, and you have lots of different ways to consume it. If you're riding in the car, you might listen to it on Apple Podcast or Stitcher. If you're at home or you want to actually watch who's talking, maybe you are a huge Elon Musk fan or a huge Tony Hawk fan or something, you want to actually see them talk about certain things, you can watch that on YouTube. Another amazing thing they've done is JRE clips. I wasn't even sure that they owned this channel, but I'm pretty sure they do, in that they edit the videos into chunks about certain topics, and they use it in a way that it divides it up into very specific things. So if you don't want to watch the entire episode, you can watch, say, 10 or 20 minutes of a certain thing that they talk about with someone who's very good at what they do or is a celebrity, and they'll even rank in search results on YouTube to get the podcast discovered even more and to even grow their audience even more. This is why their podcast and YouTube channel has gotten so big, because they leverage both things like being a comedian, being famous, interviewing famous people, interviewing lots of people from different backgrounds, and having long-form content that really benefits YouTube, which therefore makes them want to promote you, and then cross-promoting between podcast platforms and on YouTube, and then having two YouTube channels between, if you want to watch the whole episode because you're a fan of that person, or you want to watch about specific topics. So all those things combined, it's pretty ingenious the way they've structured the Joe Rogan Experience. And another thing, as Joe Rogan as a host is so easy to listen to, as opposed to, say, other people who might interview, say, scientists or something who might be kind of hard to understand for the average person who doesn't constantly keep up with that stuff, is he has a kind of easy way of talking. Like, he talks like you would talk to your best friend or something, like just the average person would talk to each other. Even though he understands a lot of these things, he kind of uses words that are very common in the English language and among people who have varying education levels. So if you look at, say, any blogger or things like politicians, even, you've seen this in the U.S. election even about 4 years ago now, where certain people are easier to listen to than others, and a lot of people resonated more with someone who they could understand. So you look at, say, the reading level. This applies to books, this applies to blogs, this applies to politics, and just about anything else. If you can explain things or talk in a way that more people can understand, you will build a much larger following, and that gives you more potential for earning money and for growth. So you look at like the reading level of best-selling authors' books as a way to kind of put this in the perspective of books. You have all sorts of famous books here by like J.R.R. Tolkien, if you've read like The Hobbit and things like that. You have a lot of different famous authors on here, and you'll notice that most of them are like less than 11th grade, or actually less than 10th grade. So all of these right here where my arrow is, to the left, all of these best-selling books were less than a 10th grade reading level. And then you even have search engines like Google who take this into account when it comes to SEO, which is a big part of marketing, whatever your brand is. And they have something called the readability test. And this might actually factor in to things like your rankings and search results, because it's easy to read for a larger number of people, which has to do with your readability. What education level do people need to usually be able to understand your content? So you can test readability, for instance, for your blog, your things like that with say a readability test tool that uses the Flesch-Kincaid, or however you say that. I probably just butchered that, but that test right there, that tests the readability. It's actually a very great way to help people understand whatever it is you're talking about, even though Joe Rogan may or may not even do that on purpose. So those are some of the reasons the Joe Rogan Experience has gotten extremely large and extremely popular and extremely profitable, why it became worth $100 million or more to Spotify, and why a lot of people will go to Spotify now just to listen to it.